We're here on Gadigal country, the traditional custodians of this part of Sydney at Sydney Park. Mike Horn, Director of Turf Design Studio. Tell me a little bit about Turf Design, Mike.
Hi Sarah, and welcome to Sydney Park. Turf Design Studio is a kind of atelier studio type of practice, I guess. Yeah, we're 18 people at the moment, so small but very skilled and very kind of agile. We specialise in both ecological work but also very urban work. So I think you'd have to say our work at Central Park and then Sydney Park, though, whilst stylistically different, though, they still, their central concern is cities and how to make them livable and lovable.
And so how does this project fit into the body of work that you've got within Turf Design?
Well, it's one of our most important projects. It's certainly been recognised around the world now, and I would say that's as much about the project. It's not about us, it's about the nature of the project, and we were just lucky enough to design it, and that's capturing water, the otherwise fresh water from the surrounding surrounding urban catchment, so the streets and just all the runoff, and harvesting that water and then sending it through and processing it into reusable water.
It's a very serene site, but it has a really interesting history that people might not be aware of. Can you explain that history for me?
Well, it started life as a brick pit. This place provided much of the building blocks for the bricks for all of inner city of Sydney. So all the warehouses around places like Chippendale, where I live, and are all come from here. So that was exhausted, that clay pit was exhausted. What do you do with a hole in the ground? You fill it full of rubbish. So it became a garbage tip, a refuge dump for the overseas people. And that was closed in the 1990s after 50 years of use. The government dedicated it as a park. What do you do with a refuge dump that you can't use anymore? You make it a park. So this is its kind of fourth use. First of all, it was Aboriginal country. It was very useful. It's right at the interface of estuary and fresh. So a lot of use, a lot of resources, food here. So then the brick pit, then the waste, and now it's a park that speaks to nature and connection all over again.
And so what was the client's brief with this extraordinarily complex site?
Their brief was fairly straightforward at the beginning. It was kind of an engineering brief when we pitched for the job, and we saw an opportunity to make it a little bit more than that. So one of the big things we did was we invited two artists onto the team by the name of Jennifer Turpin and Michaeli Crawford, and I said to them, look, there's no art. There's no art in this. It's an engineering project, but we'd love you to work as part of the design team. And they kind of, I'm not sure about this. I'm not going to get any art, But they're very, beautiful designers and beautiful people. And they said yes, and that began a process of merging. And we also got Mia from Dragonfly Ecology. So she was also fascinated with what you could do with the water in terms of providing ecological habitat. So these extra layers of kind of culture and understanding water as a sort of a cultural element, a design element, and as an ecological element, interwoven with the engineering, and then how you could then stitch that into a recreation experience as a kind of a complete sort of offer, but also being able to read all of those elements at once.
And so we've got the series of wetlands here and then the broader park. Was that all part of that original brief?
Yes, all the wetlands. This wetland here was actually a concrete stormwater container. Yeah. There was nothing beyond that until you got to a couple of small lagoons which were suffering blue-green algae outbreaks every year. Very unhealthy system, wasn't functioning at all. This is obviously, as we mentioned earlier, it's a garbage site. It's it's had a great history as a landscape architect. It's where, I guess, one piece in a long history of interventions to transform this place. It began with the state government, who laid the first lot of parks. You know, it's a 40-hectare park. Our piece is very big. It's about 20 hectares of that, but the basic infrastructure started back in the 90s, and there's been progressive interventions since then. The work that Anton James and co on the neighbour, we've got a little playground here next door, and the common, beautiful work. So we just saw ourselves as adding to the story and building that story, building that overall narrative over time.
So, I mean, it might then seem that it's a piecemeal approach, but there's a really sincere legibility to the whole site. And so I wonder if we could talk through some of the elements that help structure the site, maybe starting with how you enter the park and its edges.
You enter the park like any major park via the connecting street systems. There's little car parks, but most people come here by foot, and they just join into a park system and a path system that runs primarily east-west. There's a very strong connection which we've utilised further down. So we've used the water to be a celebration along that journey. And north-south, and the north-south connections are more about looping around the lagoons and creating a journey that in the classic sort of, I guess, landscape or any journey, a figure 8 is always a good start. The number 8 is an important number for any landscape architect, because it means you have a double loop, and you can do loop upon loop, and you will get an interesting system where you can then program experience off that movement system.
And the planting looks like it's doing well, and that's interesting because it is a cap site. Like we're on, you know, we've had a lot of soil that's had to be moved about on this site.
Yeah.
Trees are still growing. Can you talk us through the planting strategy?
Well, it's you have to work on a remediated site like this, and this was in the days of you know, when remediation wasn't the science it is today. We've had to really work hard. When we built this site, we pulled out car bodies, TVs, refrigerators, every bit of putrescible waste. You know, we had to remake earth forms. So quite a lot of intervention and modifications to the existing contouring and landforms to accommodate the works. And then it's just building up the right soil profiles, working with people like Simon Leake, who's a soil specialist, understanding the soil science, what you need to make plants grow, and then just crossing fingers and hoping.
Well, that seems to have worked. There's lovely edges around the wetland. There's some good canopy shade trees. You know, there's a nice sense of scale. So whether you're a child or an adult in this site, you get a real sense of exploration of the park. And
yeah. I think that's really one of the successes of it. We just wanted to, I guess, engender a childlike attitude about coming to the water and being able to participate in the whole place. You know, I guess that falls under the wild play category, where you know, we have kids these days. They are so contained and managed, and they don't get that experience of just releasing and getting into more an experiential level of play. So creating very safe still, but perhaps not feeling that safe, opportunities to explore. And that unleashes your imagination in a way that other more structured playgrounds can't. So it's, I think it's very important for these types of parks offer children that creative experience in a sense. It builds creativity, these sort of places. Yeah.
And so how else do people experience this park? You spoke about that a lot of people that enter the park come from the neighbouring area, but I mean, I travel 5 kilometres to come here with my children, so it's interesting because it is a bit of an attractor within Sydney. So what have people's responses been to the park over its iteration?
Well, I think they love it. Yeah, but they have a friend. There's a Friends of Sydney Park. They're very active. They produce YouTube documentaries about the wildlife. We really worked hard to get the ecosystems working. There's a lot of, and that was with the city. I'd be remiss in not talking about the city's, the City of Sydney's importance and their design team's importance. And they're our client, but they were also co-authors, I feel, of the whole project. And and that it wasn't just the design team in the city; it was ecological people within the city working with us and bringing their knowledge and learnings, and we just become the people that enable it and translate it into something again. But without all of that, we can't do anything. So it's I think it's just I think that's why people love it, is because it's kind of raw and natural. It's not fussy. It's you're allowed to kind of do whatever you want. I love the fact that dogs and wildlife coexist. The struggles that we had in meeting both of those objectives. This is one of Sydney's only, it's the only inner city off-leash dog park. Yet we have a lot of wildlife. So there's fencing in there to stop all the dogs from getting into the wetlands, but you would never see it. Or you could if you went looking, but it's not apparent. So there's a lot of management and layers of just care in making sure that everybody can coexist together.
Yeah.
So there's a lot, all those user groups. They're the two main user groups, but there's others, of course. Lots of people come here just to run, to walk, to stroll, to just chill out, just be. Yeah.
So Mark, we're here in the middle of the wetlands and I love this area of the park. And what I wanted to ask you was, is this doing anything to drought-proof the city or resilience? Because that's big now in landscape architecture.
Yes, it is. It is. This project is a water reuse project. So that's salvaging all of the stormwater from the surrounding catchments. That's Erskineville and Newtown. And capturing that in a little drain that gets pumped up before it goes into Alexandria Canal, I should say. Before we salvage that water, we pump it up over the hill through a series of environmental paddies, bioremediation beds, that basically clipped onto the lagoon system. So all the water gets poured into those. It's naturally filtered through sand and plant processes, phytoremediation, before it then empties into the lagoon system. And then the lagoon, we just recycle in a final polishing, so all the water comes out the top and through again. Now all that water is there to use in the park. So this is non-potable, reusable water that's used to irrigate the park, to care for the park, and also available for the adjacent industries. So we have a takeoff point where our local industries tap in. So it's all about making the city resilient. This is an old piece of environmental degradation with the landfill. So creating something that actually makes a difference and is transformative in building that resilience. I think that's why people have come to this project to study, because it does speak to what needs to be done into the future.
In all cities.
In all cities, in all places. Yeah.
Mike, we've come to the best part of Sydney Park, one of the parts that I love. You can't not come to Sydney Park and not come to the top of the hill here. It's one of the few areas where you get prospect of the city behind us and right through to the airport, Botany Bay and Royal National Park to the south. So we're up here because I wanted to just talk about the longitudinal section, which is the north-south section, and the cross section, east-west, and actually just have a discussion about what the landform and what's happening along those.
Yeah, it's an interesting way to think about the site in section. We think of that as a section in transect terms, which is more an ecological term for the same thing, just understanding systems along a line. And from the CBD, you can see a line of then the post-industrial lands of Alexandria and Erskineville there, a lot of new housing, a lot of urban regeneration happening there. Then this site, this kind of old tip, we're right on top, we're standing on a huge mountain of waste.
Yeah.
And it is beautiful, it is very beautiful, but it's also kind of enlightening to know that this is completely and utterly made landscape. And then we have the south part of that transect, which goes down into a valley, which is where we've used all the wetlands. And of course, keeping on going through to a lot of major infrastructure that's also part of a city. You know, cities don't operate without airports, without motorways, without factories. So they're not the glamour side of a city, but they're still an important part. And often the grittiness of those is an attractive thing too. So the east-west section, also very interesting because you have a lot of old inner city housing to the west, around Newtown and so on. And then across towards the east, you're going through Alexandria Canal, is just down the side here, which is one of Sydney's first ever canal.
Flows into Botany Bay to the south as well.
Flows into to Botany Bay via the Georges River, just where the estuary is, and that's a piece of state heritage significance in itself. It's highly polluted, but something that's waiting to be reborn and reshaped and reutilised again as well. So just fascinating to understand. I think all designers need to understand what's not only the surface of that transect, but what's below the transect, because this all sits on an aquifer as well. This whole garbage tip is on the Botany aquifer, as is all the other parts of the transect. So, you know, everything from way down deep to above, and then, you know, the air quality and the forest, the green forest that's above this line, is really important to understand.